Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Build Your Strengths and Find Your Flow. My name is Nicole Marmillo, ILR class of 2012, and I'm the president of the ILR Alumni Association, also known as the ILRAA. Today's session is a part of the ILRAA's Career Transition Initiative. This initiative aims to support alumni who are re-entering the workforce, navigating a layoff, or pivoting in their career, and has hosted a series of Lunch and Learn webinars since February on various subjects like job search with recruiting firms, personal branding, navigating workplace conflicts, and understanding severance and employment agreements. We also offered complimentary headshots across 6 cities. We recently partnered with Cornell Alumni Career Programs to broaden the reach of our webinars. They provide career-focused resources, learning opportunities, events, a monthly newsletter, the CUE Links networking platform, and more to alumni supporting us throughout our career journeys. I welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat, as many of you have been doing. Use the reaction buttons at the bottom of your screen to interact during this session, and I encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A feature. We'll do our best to address those questions that come in through the chat and our Q&A, and address the questions submitted in advance with the registration for this session. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared with attendees after we've concluded. Finally, Cornell staff is online to assist with any tech needs. They've added a handout that you'll need for today's session into the chat, and we encourage you to grab a pen and paper or open a note on your computer to do the activities live with our incredible panelist. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our panelist, Jackie Garrido. She is a proven talent development leader with over 27 years of experience. She's held progressive responsibilities in human resources and talent management, working with diverse global industries and Fortune 500 companies. Before founding her own consulting firm in 2023, Jackie spent a transformative 12 years at Meta, formerly Facebook, leading teams in the development and delivery of scalable learning solutions and spearheading complex company-wide initiatives during periods of hypergrowth. Her career also includes roles at Yahoo and Nestle USA, where she honed her strengths for people development, leading project teams, and building and optimizing experiences that support people in doing the best work of their careers. With a BS in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell University, complemented by several specialized certifications, including a strengths performance coach, Jackie is a passionate advocate for lifelong learning, building high-performing teams, helping people play to their strengths, and building cultures where people thrive. Outside her office, Jackie loves to travel and spend time outdoors with family and friends. She enjoys running, rock climbing, practicing yoga, and exploring the beautiful state of Washington. Thanks so much for joining us, Jackie. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole, for that wonderful introduction, and for Alana and Allison for being with us here today. And for all of you for joining this session. I'm really excited to be here with you. Today, we're going to discover and leverage our strengths and really find our flow in both work and life. And so you'll see me kind of navigate the slides here as I also navigate Zoom a little bit. As Nicole said, I do run my own company at the moment, Talent Accelerators Consulting, and she gave me a wonderful introduction. And I also wanted to add that I get my energy from building and optimizing experiences that empower people to have the greatest impact doing work they love. So usually when I do my introduction, I always start with that. And I tee that up in this session specifically because we're going to be crafting our own statements where we do those types of introductions. So I wanted to ask first, would you like to understand what is uniquely you, feel fulfilled in your everyday tasks, find a sense of flow where things come naturally to you, unlock your full potential, and live your best life? So let us know in the chat if that is why you're here and joining us today, because ultimately that's what we're going to be doing in this session. So I wanted to get that out of the way and make sure you're in the right session, first of all, but also take you through a quick exercise. So let's close our eyes as we're all coming into this session. We're going to close our eyes for a moment. We're going to imagine what that would feel like to wake up a year from now, being clear about what makes you uniquely you, feeling a sense of fulfillment every day, having periods in your day of flow where things come really naturally, where you feel like your full potential is being unlocked and you're living your best life. Now sit in that feeling for a moment and notice what it does to your body. And so that's the purpose of today's session, is to talk about how to build your strengths and find your flow. So go ahead and open your eyes if you haven't already done that. As we go through the session and you have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, and we'll definitely answer questions at the end of the session. So today we're going to embark on a journey to not only discover, but to actively build and leverage your strengths. And this is really about the discovery, the sharing, and the building of strengths. So we're going to start in the discover your strengths. We'll start with self-reflection and personal insight, which really forms the core of our journey. And this phase is really about uncovering what makes you uniquely you. And then we're going to move into share. And that's really about how do you explore effective ways to communicate your strengths to others, enhancing both your personal relationships, but also your professional relationships. And then we'll finish with build, kind of to finish off that pyramid. We'll strategize on how to further develop and integrate these strengths into your daily work and your personal life to continue achieving continuous growth and satisfaction. And we'll definitely talk about the pinnacle in the middle, which is flow. How do you achieve flow state? But we'll also be sprinkling that throughout the session. And as we go through this, I really want you to be thinking about this for yourself through the lens of, how do I reach flow? How do I get to points in my day, every day, where I do have the opportunity to really nourish my soul through the work that I'm doing, through my everyday tasks? And sometimes those tasks can seem mundane, but how can we bring more of what we love, more of who we are into those tasks so that we can have that every day? Okay, so what is a strength and why does it matter? First, to explain what a strength is, I have to give you a little bit of history. And it started in the 1970s through the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote this book, Flow, kind of later on, but really started to think about this flow state, which is a mental state where individuals are really immersed in an activity, experiencing a sense of energized focus, really feeling involved in a sense of enjoyment. And this really comes from an intrinsic motivation where people feel like time just, this is something they want to do, but also while they're doing it, time starts to disappear and the task becomes effortless. Then in the 2000s, you really started to see this positive psychology and strengths revolution come into the scene. And positive psychology was really Martin Seligman, who started to really shift the narrative from thinking about weaknesses or focusing on weaknesses to focusing on strengths. And that being a source of well-being, both mental well-being, physical well-being. And so how he started to talk about flourish or flourishing in how do you identify and cultivate your strengths to make a meaningful contribution. And then at the same time was the strengths revolution, where the Gallup organization, and specifically Donald Clifton and Marcus Buckingham, really started to think about, how do you leverage strengths in the workplace? How do you actually play to your strengths every day where you can achieve higher performance, rise to higher levels in the organization, and report the most successful and fulfilling career experiences? And that's not just good for individuals, that's good for businesses too. And businesses started to report that when they leveraged the strengths of their people, they had higher productivity, people stayed longer, and they were really satisfied with their work. So you start to see this intersection between all three of these in the sense of, how do you help people be and feel and perform their best? And that's really kind of the essence of all of this work. And I put some books up here on this slide, so in case you wanted to go and check out some of this work yourself, this is some of the work that I'll be referencing as we go along today. Now, here's the thing. The problem with kind of this work is, to kind of Martin Seligman's point, was that we tend to focus on our weaknesses. It's actually rather counterintuitive for us as a society to be thinking about strengths, because we tend to think about and be fascinated by weaknesses. We actually kind of naturally go to, well, what's wrong with me? If you ever get feedback from someone and they're giving you positive feedback, you kind of think, well, what's the negative feedback? Tell me what I did wrong. And that's not unnatural. It's not uncommon. In fact, in studies of people who are under 30, 73% believe that the secret to success and impact in life is fixing their weaknesses. And if you think about it, everywhere you look, people are looking at weaknesses or looking at the bad to understand success and happiness. You look at divorce to look at what makes a healthy relationship or a happy marriage. You look at credit worthiness through your debt. So there's a little bit of this negative kind of fixation, if you will. And so if we really start to turn that on its side, it's really thinking about actually how do we do this transformative shift and really think about what's good and what we're bringing to the table that we have a strength in. So that's really where I spend some time thinking about how do you start to make that shift when you're focused on the negative to how do you focus on the positive? How do you focus on the things that you do well? And so I want to ask you for a moment, when you think about this in your past, when you were fixated on improving a weakness because you were told you had to fix it, or you felt like you had to fix it to meet others' expectations of what you should be, what did that feel like? And let us know, what did it feel like when people told you that you had to fix a weakness or you had to improve something because you had to conform to someone else's expectations, not because you genuinely wanted to, but because you had to conform. Yeah, I see some struggle, defeat, confusion, exactly. Hurt, failure. Yeah, lots of comments coming into the chat. Thanks for being a part of this. And so really what we want to do is, again, start with this being at the forefront of our minds, like our strength. So what is a strength? A strength is an activity, just reading my slide, an activity that you're good at or have the potential to be good at, and that you love doing. It gives you energy. And being good at something or just being good at something actually does not make it a strength. And that can be somewhat hard for people to grasp, right? If you're doing this is the way I want you to think about it. If you're doing an activity that drains you, you may be good at it, but if it drains you, then that's not a strength. So you have to pay attention to both the skill that you're bringing in and the energy, because the energy will be that indication of whether that's a strength for you. And so I actually like Marcus Buckingham's very clear way of describing this, which is a strength is an activity that makes you feel strong, one that strengthens you. So as you're doing it, you actually feel like you are strong. As opposed to if you're doing something that you are good at, but it doesn't make you feel strong, it actually makes you feel weak or depleted, that is not a strength. That's actually a weakness. So you have to pay attention to the feeling. And we're going to do a little bit of that through some exercises as we go along. So I know some of this can be hard to absorb as we're going through this, because I have this thing where I say strength is not something you're good at, and weakness is not something you're bad at. So I'm going to unpack that for a minute, because a strength is not something you're good at. And I talked a little bit about that because it can be something that can deplete you even if you're good at it. But this other piece around weakness is not something you're bad at is actually coming back to the definition. You may not be good at it yet, but if it feels good and you have the potential to be good at it, then it can definitely be a strength. Okay, so we got that out of the way in terms of what is a strength. And I want to kind of share a quick story with you as we go along. So Nicole's gave this introduction. I actually started my career as an HR business partner. I was an HR business partner for about 7 years. And there were parts of being an HR business partner that I really enjoyed. And there were parts of being an HR business partner that really depleted me. Like really, I would come home at the end of the day and I would feel so exhausted, but in a bad way. Like I just didn't have a good day. And so what started to happen was I started to actually go through the work of Donald Clifton and Marcus Buckingham through Now Discover Your Strengths, which is one of the books I showed in the earlier slide. And I started to uncover my own strengths. And that really started to lead me down a really powerful path. That was actually a differentiator for me in terms of creating a career that I really loved. And to this day, get excited about every single day when I get up in the morning. So I wanted to share that, and I'll come back to that story as we go along. So now that we are on the same page about the definition of a strength, let's go ahead and discover our own strengths. And understanding and leveraging our strengths is really where the starting point is. As I mentioned, it's the core of our journey, but it's also the foundation to the other pieces on the triangle, and especially in the flow. So if you read any of the books, Flourish or Flow, you start to see this idea of strengths really come through. That's really where the intersection is across all of this different work. And when we play to our strengths, we bring our best selves to our teams, to our families, to our communities. It's really bringing our best selves forward. And if you're a leader or a manager currently, this is really powerful because it can really lead you to manage high-performing teams. I've actually had the pleasure. I love managing people. I love leading teams. It's something that I get really excited about. And a lot of the time, the feedback that I've received is that I do it really well because I play to people's strengths. It's one of the first conversations I have with people when I'm managing them. We start to really unlock that so that I know where I can depend on them. So let's keep this in mind as we continue to today's session. Is not only is it about leveraging your own strengths, but how are you also leveraging the strengths of others? How are you showing up? And then how are you inviting other people to show up? Okay, so how do you start to spot the patterns in yourself that indicate that you have a strength? You look for the signs of a strength. You look for the signals, and I'm not going to go through this slide in too much detail, but I want you to keep a couple things in mind. One is instinct. This is a really powerful thing to pay attention to when you're talking about strengths, is what are you instinctively looking forward to? What are you raising your hand for that you're not even realizing that you may be raising your hand, but you find yourself leaning in? These are really indicative signs of a strength. You can ask yourself, what do I find myself instinctively raising my hand for? If I was left entirely to my own devices and I could design my perfect day, what activities or situations would I do that would pull me that I would be pulled towards? For me, that's project planning. I love creating a mean project plan. I couple that with being a sequential thinker who can think through a step-by-step process of what needs to happen, even if I've never done it before. And I also have the natural talents and the skills and the knowledge that I've built over my career through courses and doing project plans and playing with different tools that are out there. But I also really enjoy it. Like, I really love it. And sometimes I have to intentionally keep my hand down because I have too many projects going on. And so I have to say, nope, I can't raise my hand for that. But I do love it. So in a nutshell, you really want to be thinking about, as you're about to do the activity, are you instinctively volunteering for it? Do you get excited about it while you're doing it? Does time fly by? Are you, what seems like 5 minutes, now it's actually been like an hour or 2 hours? That happens to me a lot. Is it something that as you're doing it, you're kind of bummed out when someone distracts you and you don't want to get pulled away from the task? That happens to me too. I'm a parent, so that happens to me quite often. But also after you've done it, do you feel a sense of satisfaction? You may be tired, but you're not tired in a depleted way. You're tired in a almost satisfied, I did a great thing today way. So pay attention to that. And I know there are people here in various stages of their life who are going through transitions. Some of the things that I would advise is, one is, if you're a current student or you've currently graduated, think about the classes that you've really enjoyed. Think about the things that you gravitated towards while you were in school, or maybe in some internships that you did. If you're transitioning to a new role or considering a new role, think about the activities that you do that check off all these boxes. If you're feeling stagnant right now in your career, or you're feeling bored, which has happened to me many times throughout my career, think about the activities that will give you joy or are giving you joy or gave you joy at one time in a previous position. If you've been laid off, or you have a break in service, or you've been out of the workforce for a while, reflect back to your last position or the positions that you've held in the past, or even the everyday activities that you do or you've been doing during this break in service, and kind of sit down with some of these exercises we're going to do and see which ones that you've really enjoyed. I know that even as a parent, when I've taken time off, I've still done project plans for my house. So it's very clear that that is one of my strengths. But definitely leverage this opportunity to think about what those things are for you. So we're going to do a little bit of self-reflection. I'm going to take you through a few exercises that are going to help you kind of think about what are those tasks that you enjoy the most, what are the skills that come naturally to you, and yeah, let's get into it. And I'm going to keep an eye on some of the chat as much as I can as we do some of these exercises. So if any questions come up, just feel free to put them in the chat. So if you did download the handout, I would suggest taking that out now so that we can do this together. If you don't have the handout, you haven't been able to access it, a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, or a note, just opening a note on your computer would work just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through our first exercise, which is, what are the specific activities that fulfill you? I want you to take a few moments, and I want you to review the questions that are either on the handout or on the slide, and answer some of the questions. You don't have to answer them in order, but the idea is that you start thinking about these answers for yourself. You start doing this self-reflection. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. And the goal by the end of the 3 minutes is that you have at least 3 activities that you've noted here. And so keep in mind that this is not what's been done to you. It's what you do. What is the action that you're taking that is giving you that enjoyment? What is the activity that you're looking forward to doing? So that's the first thing to keep in mind there. And you may enjoy doing something, but maybe you're not good at it yet. Again, that has a potential to be a strength. And so I'm going to start my timer and give you about 3 minutes. And as you're doing that, I'm going to read through the comments in the chat. So if you are still jotting down some notes, feel free to continue. I'm going to move right along. And hopefully, as you were thinking about the answers to these questions, they were really honest for yourself, because it's really about honoring and listening to your own energy, your own feelings about something. No matter the answers, they're meaningful for you. And that's the really important thing to consider here. And also, as you were writing them down, hopefully you started to have feelings that were positive. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, what does it feel like when you're playing to your strengths? What do you feel in that moment? And so as you were kind of going through this exercise, what were some of those feelings that were coming up for you, where you felt, where you were thinking back on the things that you were really enjoying or you felt fulfilled by, but what were some of those feelings? Or what do you think that would feel like if you got to experience these activities that really played to your strengths? Timelessness. Ooh, I love that. Worthy, motivated, passionate, confident, energizing, joy, a deeper type of satisfaction, fulfillment, elation. Yeah, I love all of those words. They're making me happy just reading them. I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. Hopeful, energy, excitement, connection with other people, at peace, calmness. Yes, limitless. Unstoppable, truly living, connectedness, gratitude, excitement. So many fun, yummy things. I love it. Fun, yummy things. I completely agree with you. Zachariah, maybe, I hope I got that right. Connected to myself, Yeah, feeling of tingly. I love that. Well, let's keep moving forward so we can do our next exercise. And I know a couple questions have come in the chat and I want to answer them. I'm going to move through the exercises and then come back to some of these questions as we go along. But the next exercise is called Love It, Loathe It. And it actually comes from, I think it was Marcus Buckingham's third or fourth book. I can't remember because I've used this exercise so much. So if you remember back when I was explaining that I was an HR business partner for 7 years, and then I started to realize that there were things about the role that I loved and things that I didn't love. Well, this was the exercise that was the eye-opening experience for me that showed me why I was coming home each day depleted. As an HR business partner, you do the full gamut of human resources, everything from recruiting to compensation to performance management to learning and development to termination, performance improvement plans, all the things. And what I really loved was the employee experiences, and I love the employee communications, and I really loved the learning and development pieces and the culture pieces. And what I really loathed were the employee relations pieces and the people challenges and those kind of things where you had to manage a lot of conflict throughout the day. And so what I recognized when doing this exercise for the first time was I was spending about 70% of my job on the activities that I loathed. And that's why I was coming home depleted every day. And I had to focus, I had to kind of refocus myself and say, okay, how can I do more of what I love? Or how can I bring more of my strengths into the things that I'm having to do every day? Because those things are not going to go away. But how can I approach maybe my job differently so I bring some more joy into it? And so that's what happened with this Love It, Loathe It exercise. And HR, there's a lot of HR business partners in companies, and so we all approach our roles differently. I mean, two people could have the exact same role but approach it very differently, or loved very different things about it. And so it's really important to recognize that for yourself. So I'm going to have you then go to the next exercise on your handout, which is the Love Loathe It. And I'm going to have you take a few minutes, just 2 minutes actually. But there's two ways to actually approach this exercise. We're going to take one way, which is to open your calendar, look back at your last week, and record the activities in your calendar that were either in the Love It column or were in the Loathe It column. This is whether you were at home, whether you were volunteering, whether you were doing projects, side hustle projects, or you were in your regular work environment doing your job. Just look back at your calendar and see where you would put each thing that was scheduled or each thing that you had to do. And the important thing here also is to note how you felt. Because if you see in the Love It, it says, I felt strong when. And if on the Loathed It column, you see, I felt weak, drained, bored when. So take 2 minutes. And I love seeing all these words describing strengths. I feel strengthened just in this session. I actually do feel strengthened in this session because this is what I love to do. This is all about self-reflection. Self-reflection never stops. I do it almost on a daily basis. And I think it's a really powerful tool, no matter where you are in your career, no matter where you are personally or professionally, to do self-reflection. And so I encourage you to keep doing these exercises beyond this session. And just one other thing I want to note here is that there may be things that you are still learning how to do. So it may be painful in the learning process. That doesn't mean that it's something you loathe. It's good to be challenged. The important thing is to, maybe you're not good at it yet. Consider if you're just not good at it yet, but it could be in the love column. So kind of hold out to see where that lands once you've learned something. Yes, the most interesting part is what activities I canceled or avoided because I loathe them so much. Well, if you can cancel or avoid them, that is a really great technique because if you don't have to do them, that's great. Like, just get rid of them. And one thing I always say is you can tell something if you're procrastinating, but I have two kind of sides to that because I tend to procrastinate on things. And then once I get them started, I'm really into them and I really love doing it. And then I lose track of time. But if you're procrastinating and then you do it and you still are feeling like the time is going by really slowly and you think an hour has gone by, but only 5 minutes has gone by, then that's a loathe it activity. So definitely take that into consideration. So as you were doing this exercise, what stood out to you about what you logged in each category? What patterns did you notice? What insights does this give you about your strengths? Interesting. It's not the what, it depends on who I was meeting with. Yeah, that could be big too. I wonder what conversations need to be had there. But sometimes it definitely is the topic too. So it's can be both the who and the what. And that's one of the things that's really important in these exercises is to be really clear about the activity that you're doing. And I'm going to show you the next slide just to kind of tell you that you can have these descriptive words about what you do well, what comes naturally to you in terms of what you're doing in the activities, but you have to be specific about the activity. For example, if I was talking to someone about cloud computing and machine learning, which is a class I just did at Stanford, I probably wouldn't enjoy that conversation as much as I would enjoy a conversation about how to play to your strengths or how to maximize your energy throughout the day. Or I spent most of the class, my Stanford class, actually doing most of the exercises on employee experiences. So I turned a very heavy digital tools class into how does this apply to the employees in a workplace? So that's how I shifted it to playing to my strengths. But it is very much about the what are you doing? Or who are you talking to about what particular subject? Let's see, there were some related tasks that I loathe one and love the other. The loathe was process and the love was outcome experience. Okay, so sometimes the process can be very painful, but you feel a sense of satisfaction afterwards. So that's also something to pay attention to. Is there ways that you're approaching the process that maybe could leverage your strengths more? So as you go into this third exercise, what gives you the most energy? Think about what in that process maybe were you doing that wasn't giving you that flow or that sense of satisfaction or fulfillment. Maybe it was about evaluating data and that's just not your jam. And so how could you approach it differently so that you are leveraging your talents or your strengths in the process? Again, two people may have the same job, be doing the same process, but approaching it very differently and hopefully leveraging their strengths as they're approaching that process. So that could be something also to consider. Okay, I'm going to move us into this next exercise, excuse me, and just tell you that for this exercise, which I'm not going to go into too much, we're not going to spend too much time here, is the important thing is to go back through your exercises, your first and second exercises, and see if you wrote down any of these words. Or just go through this and see what words kind of you're drawn to, you're paying attention to. Circle those words in your handout and write them down in your blank piece of paper and start to craft what those words mean to you. And again, be specific about the activity, because the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually put these words into crafting a strength statement that we can share with others. So for example, I put, I think in the beginning I said, I enjoy building and optimizing experiences that empower people to do the best, to have the best impact or the greatest impact of their careers doing work they love. So I've been crafting that statement over time, and I use it in almost every conversation, interviews, conversations with clients, when I'm talking to people for the first time, like I've crafted my strength statement, and that's what we're going to do next, so that I can actually share that with others and they know how to depend on me. And we're going to move into share really quickly here, but I do want you to, as you move through the next exercise, is to pull all of this together and name your top 3 strengths. And so you're not going to probably have time to do that today, but I'll share mine, which I showed a little bit about project plans. I enjoy building and executing project plans to launch employee experiences. I get really excited about that. I can simplify the complexity in a company-wide employee initiative to drive a solution. I get really excited about that. So those are the things that I want you to name for yourself in terms of your own strengths, so that you can then share that with others. So take a minute maybe and reflect on the exercises you've completed so far, and then maybe write one statement if you can as I move along. And I really want to emphasize this is where you find flow state. This is very specific, obviously, to what I do, and what I don't think that I would be able to do this, like I said, for machine learning or engineering, cloud computing, product marketing. But some of these skills and some of these strengths are transferable. And so I think I saw some questions around career shifts. As you're thinking about career shifts, what are translatable to other careers that you're thinking about? How can you pull those strengths and apply them to what those careers are, what those everyday tasks are of those other things that you're thinking about? Okay, couple things to keep in mind is you can ask others for input. I actually highly encourage this, is to reach out to people from all facets of your life, not just work, but just remember that ultimately you decide if it's a strength, because they may tell you, oh yeah, you're really good at this. You should do this, or this is something that I would depend on you for. And then you go, oh, but I hate that. I actually don't enjoy that at all. So that's why it's always up to you. It's, for me, it's spreadsheets. I don't like budgeting, spreadsheets about budgets, but I have to review them in my roles sometimes. So, but I am clear with people like, hey, if you want me to review a spreadsheet, like, it's not going to be my favorite thing, but I'll get it done. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Like I said, 2 people may have the identical jobs, but approach them very differently. This is not a one and done. So I said before, I encourage you to continue to do the self-reflection, because it is important to keep crafting your strengths. Don't ignore your weaknesses, but just really focus on how do you allow your strengths to flourish. Okay, let's move into share. How do you share this with other people? This is a quote from Martin Seligman that I really enjoy, that I really love. Know what your greatest strengths are and use them to belong to or in service of something larger than you are. And so to share with other people, I think, is the next step. Once you've kind of started to uncover what your strengths are, don't keep them to yourself. Plan ways to leverage them with others. Let people know how they can depend on you. Some of my favorite statements are, this is how you can depend on me, or come to me when you need this. And then find people that can help you think about ways to leverage them. Request to work on projects that leverage your strengths. I just gave you my little elevator pitch, but practice your elevator pitch. And definitely just keep talking about them. I mean, I'd be curious, how else might you share your strengths with people around you, both your family, your significant other, your team members, your manager? I mean, there's so many people to share them with. How would you share your strengths? Here's a couple of things I suggest in terms of approaching conversations. You can start you look at that altitude. There could be various altitudes in which you share your strengths with people. You can say, I enjoy communicating, which was this list of words, which are just descriptors. I enjoy communicating, whatever that is for you. And strengths activities, you can say, I feel really strong when I do, or when I create, or when I execute. And then strengths moments, I felt really strong. So you can share with people, I felt really strong when I worked on that presentation for you, or I felt really strong when I crafted that message for our social media post. So those are some ways you can approach the conversation. Yeah, I lose a track of time when, for sure. Okay. We're going to move into build. I'm moving through these last few slides pretty quickly because I want to get to Q&A. But definitely keep crafting your work and your everyday life using your strengths as much as you can. I volunteered to be on the PTA board for my kids' school, and I have created more project plans for this role than I probably have in the last year, but it's been fun. I mean, that's what I enjoy, but I love the organization of creating project plans. So I continue to build it, even though it's not part of my everyday work, right? I'm building my strengths through other ways, through other roles that I take on. Design a beautiful day where you leverage your strengths. So this is a big one for me. I'm huge on visioning and doing vision exercises. But if you can think through what your day would look like, where you're leveraging your strengths, where you're getting up in the morning and you're excited about what you're going to do, or you're going to get into that flow state. What does that look like for you? What would you be doing? Be specific about that. You can also assess your current role and think about, in your current role, what are you doing, or what could you be doing to really start to bring out more of your strengths in that role. As you're exploring new opportunities, you can consider how to take on those challenges with leveraging your strengths, or even exploring with your manager how your role can shift to maybe perhaps do things that will strengthen you. I'd be curious too, in the chat, in terms of what other things could you do to build your strengths? So feel free to add in your own suggestions. And so what we're ultimately getting to is flow, which is an energized focus. It's hard to stop. It's fulfillment. You're in the zone. I hope that all of you can get there. It's something that's really powerful. Like I said, it's a differentiator, both personally and professionally. And I think about, how you are so unique. Everyone is so unique and powerful, and really paying attention to your strengths will really help you bring out that uniqueness, because like I said, you could have the same role as someone else, but you'd be approaching it very differently. And that really speaks to your uniqueness, and really building a meaningful life and your meaningful contribution through your strengths is just a really powerful thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Q&A.
Thanks so much, Jackie. This was great. As I'm sitting here sort of doing my own self-reflection, I think there's this concern that, there's a gap between what we write down on the paper and what we're doing day to day and actually getting to our flow state. So I want to kind of start with a couple questions about sort of bridging that gap. And so my first question is about, how do we sort of, what are best practices for how do we approach responsibilities and sort of these like building block type tasks that are going to get us to our flow state? A question came in from someone saying they're bought a business that could encompass sort of everything that they love, but there's so much to do to get to that point of flow state. So kind of if you could talk us through a little bit about that approach.
Sure. The first thing I would recommend is assessing what needs to be done. Kind of take an inventory of whether it's your work that you have to do for the day, or if it's, you're starting a new business, which congratulations to whoever that is. What is it that needs to get done? And then go through that list and put the things that are obviously priority number one. I have to get this done. And if that's not something that you do well, or that's a weakness for you, maybe think about, how do I approach this so it's a strength? How do I think about what I do well, or what comes naturally to me to be able to approach this and get this done? And then set some time aside to be able to do that. And so that really helps in terms of that prioritization, and then looking at that prioritization through the lens of, how can I bring my best self to this so that I give it everything I have, but in a really powerful way.
And that actually, as I'm listening, I'm thinking too, maybe outsourcing or team building could
Yes.
be a way to sort of supplement that. And another person asked a question about sort of how does being in flow state sort of help us identify the best people to surround ourselves with as we're kind of building out teams and developing ourselves?
Oh, I love this question so much, because I've done this so much in my career, which is to build teams around me that complement my strengths and my weaknesses. I'm very clear about what my weaknesses are, and I tell people what they are. And then I very intentionally look for people who have those strengths that I don't. Because I think, again, coming back to the question of starting your own business, you're not, this conception of being a well-rounded person is a misconception. You're not going to be well-rounded. No one is. And so how do you create a well-rounded team or a really powerful, high-performing team around you where everyone's strengths are really coming to the table? One thing I've done in my past is I really think about, what do I need on my team to be a successful team? What capabilities do I need? What skills, what abilities? And then I look at my team and say, okay, what do I have? And then I can recognize what I don't have and go and recruit for that. And so that is also another powerful exercise that I would suggest.
That's great. A theme that's coming up through the chat and some of the questions that we received in advance is sort of tough choices and having difficulty answering some of these questions, and difficulty with some of that self-reflection. And also an idea of maybe your current situation, your job, your life responsibilities are restricting your flow. Sort of how do we respond to those challenges and position ourselves as best as possible to get into flow state while recognizing that, we have a quality of life we want to maintain. We have child responsibilities, parent responsibilities, whatever. How do we do that?
Definitely. It's, for me, an everyday struggle with all of the different demands that are on my life currently. And it really is about setting aside time. It's for sure a lot of calendar management, but it's thinking about, what are the responsibilities that I have on my plate, and how can I then manage around those or schedule around those so I can find those periods of time that I can have flow. Maybe it's, my toddler is asleep from 11 to 12. I'm going to just capitalize on that 11 to 12 and minimize all distractions. And that is my hour of flow. And the minimizing distractions is hard. There's a lot of things vying for our attention these days. And so it really is important to have that discipline to say, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just going to do this one thing. So that can be the nap time hustle. Yes, I love it. So that's really important. I'll just say one other thing about the finding flow. I have, COVID for me was probably the hardest time, where my kids were home all day while I was also managing a very demanding job, and just there was a lot of responsibilities. And so one of the things that I ended up sacrificing was sleep, which is hard because quality of life is so important. And I don't suggest it, because first of all, I love sleep, like sleep. My kid actually wrote for Mother's Day, things that my mom does well: reading and sleeping. And I wanted to just kiss him. Okay. So, but I love sleep, but I did have to sacrifice sleep, where I had to decide, okay, I have all these things going on during the day. When am I going to get this time to do this work that I really want to do? It's projects that I love, that I want to get done. And so I would either stay up later at night and just try to sleep in a little bit longer, or I would go to sleep early and wake up earlier before my kids got up. And so sometimes you do have to just kind of consider in your schedule, where are those? They're not going to be ideal times during the day, but if you can find them, I just think it really helps with burnout, because even that time during COVID, I could have easily burnt out given how much was going on during the day with my kids and then working at night, but I didn't. I still felt very invigorated. I still felt very much in my flow. And so that's what I would recommend.
That's great.
I am back. I'm sorry, I had
Oh,
some
good.
tech
I was
issues.
gonna jump in for you, Nicole. So
Thank you. Thanks,
I'll hop
Alana. One of the questions that got a lot of upvotes is, do others sometimes feel like their strength is not particularly useful to others, and that it doesn't translate into a role that others would hire for? I'd love to hear your thoughts on navigating that.
Yeah, one of the things that I coach people on when interviewing for roles is, first of all, look at the role and see what you're paying attention to. What is it in the role description that you are feeling energized by? Hopefully, it's more than 50% of the role. If it's less than 50%, you might want to think about a different role, but hopefully you've done some self-reflection leading up to that. But the idea is that if you can really capitalize on those areas of the role that excite you, that you're paying attention to, where you're seeing kind of this really nice alignment between you and the role itself, I think that's where you go. Sometimes, if you're doing a career shift, it's maybe thinking very thoughtfully about, okay, well, I was doing this before and this role requires this. How can I then demonstrate that these are the translatable skills that I'm bringing to the table? These are the translatable strengths. It does require a little bit of work. I've done sheets with people where I list the responsibilities of the role on the left side column, and then we go through each one, and we go through strengths and go, okay, well, how could you show up with your strengths here? How could you show up with your strengths there? And so if you don't have like a role description, you could also just have a conversation. And I think it's really unpacking that.
That sounds helpful too, as some of the questions coming in are about doing the job search. So using your strength-based statements that we've prepared today and actually putting that in practice when we're doing the job search. It sounds like maybe
Yeah,
looking
exactly.
at the job description.
And can I just also answer this question that just came in about how do you get out of burnout? If you're in burnout, it's really assessing what's causing that burnout. And, it could be multiple things. But if it's a situation of you just don't like the job anymore, or there are things about you're feeling depleted by the job, I would say really look at how can you bring some of your joy and your strengths back into the role. If you can look for another role at the same time in parallel, I would recommend that. But it is really thinking about how can I bring more joy into the role through things that I do naturally well, or I want to be doing, and have those conversations with the people around you as much as you can. And if it just doesn't line up, then consider maybe a different role.
Fantastic. Okay, we are just coming on the hour. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic session. And for folks that joined in late, please know we've recorded today's session, so we will be sending it out in the days following, and you'll have access to the slides and the exercises that Jackie helped walk us through. I encourage you to keep doing the self-reflection as she has shared. Thank you so much, Jackie. We also are going to put Jackie's LinkedIn link into the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions or want to send some feedback her way, you can access her via LinkedIn. Please know that in the follow-up email, you're going to get a survey about today's session. We'd love to hear your feedback so that both the ILR Alumni Association and Cornell Alumni Career Programs can continue to provide you with tools and resources that are going to help you as you're taking your career steps. Really appreciate all of you attending today and wish you a good afternoon. Thanks again,
Please
Jackie.
continue to celebrate the uniqueness that you are, and good luck to you. I'm definitely here if you need anything. Thank you so much, Nicole, Lana, and Allison.